Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 197, the St. Kim edition. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm Alan Haley. And today is September 10, 2015.
Obviously, when I have Alan Haley on the other side of the camera, I want to talk about legal news. And this has been a pretty incredible week in Christian news, legal news, states' rights news, legislation from the bench news, rule of law news. I mean, we've covered the whole gamut, so I have Alan Haley here to help work it out. And we can do this from many different areas. We can juxtapose this against the civil rights. We can go back and talk about how the rule of law really started with the Magna Carta. We can talk about the Christian principles involved in this, and whether Christians should just keep quiet at work and let things be, if they don't like it, quit, that type of thing. But we have a unique situation here where we have an elected official who represents the laws of her state and the people who elected her, making a decision based upon her faith, and wow, the world explodes. So let's talk a little bit about the explosion. A federal judge said you have to go to jail because you're in contempt of court because you will not sign wedding decrees where two men or two women want to get married.
Right. Notice that just a few weeks after the Obergefell decision, which cautioned that the religious rights of people might not be protected by the majority, a federal judge takes the first extreme, takes the most severe remedy, does not consider any of the alternative lesser remedies that he could have used, and simply sends her to jail. So there we are. That's how much you get to trust the federal government to protect your rights, and how much you get to trust the people that are running this show in terms of being the activists and bringing these cases in front of the courts. They want to punish the Christians who have opposed these same-sex marriages all along and who continue to oppose them today, such as Kim Davis did.
But Alan and Kevin, you don't understand. The Supreme Court said that same-sex marriage is now the rule of law for all America, every state, bar none, including Kentucky. How can she possibly do this?
Okay, well, first let's qualify it. It's not the Supreme Court, but 5 justices of the Supreme Court stepping out on their own. The other 4 would not join them. And that's not always a good sign when they're pronouncing constitutional law to have it on a 5-4 decision, because that means the next justice that comes up, if he joins the minority, there goes your constitutional law, there goes same-sex marriage for the whole country. So that's not exactly a firm ground on which to stand and to say this has to apply across the board. And the Supreme Court really, if it were watching its own authority and moral authority, it probably would refrain from deciding these major constitutional cases on a 5-4 basis and would say, we're not there yet, we're going to wait and let things percolate a little bit more through the system until we come to that ground, and let people continue to do the democratic process they had been up to that point. They simply decide they're going to cut it off. No more debate. We had enough. Let's just declare the same-sex marriages everywhere. Well,
I think it's incumbent upon you and I to let people know what the role of judges are. Judges are only there to interpret what is happening based upon their interpretation of the Constitution.
They're supposed to apply the law to the facts.
Right.
They're not supposed to invent the law or legislate the law. Under our Constitution, all legislative power is vested in the Congress of the United States, not in any other branch. And what they did was they legislated a new definition of marriage. They changed the definition from the traditional 2,000-year-old one of a man and a woman, and now said it's just 2 people of any gender.
But in reality, marriage is not in our Constitution.
No,
so
it's not.
They should not be able to rule on it at all.
No, and Justice Kennedy 2 years ago in his Windsor decision
Hmm.
recognized that family law has been the traditional exclusive preserve of the states.
Hmm.
And here he is 2 years later saying, well, we don't care if it's exclusive preserve, we're going to step in and we're going to lay down our law here. And so that's the quandary that this creates for people who respect the rule of law. Because yes, 5 justices can declare a rule of law, but they're not supposed to legislate like this. And the only way you get a national rule like this applicable to all the people, in other words, it would be one thing if they simply said to the couple in Obergefell, okay, you're married. Nobody can say you're not married.
Right.
But they went beyond that and said, now everyone in all the country has to recognize same-sex marriages. That's legislation. That's the definition of legislation, is something that you pass that applies to everybody across the board. And that's only supposed to be done by Congress. And you know what makes this even worse is that 2 of those justices in the majority, Justice Kagan and Justice Ginsburg, both had previously performed same-sex marriages for their friends before deciding the Obergefell case. Now, if you're a justice, you're supposed to recuse yourself if you've already formed an opinion about the validity of the issues before you. You're not supposed to go in biased like that and just pretend that you're another impartial justice in a black robe.
Wow.
So this whole thing was just a mockery.
It was a mockery, but in fairness, I think a lot of the other judges did heterosexual marriages too, and they probably should have excused themselves. But I get your point.
Which is why they had no business going there in the first place.
I get your point. Now we're to this reality. A woman says, no, I'm not going to do this. It's wrong from my Christian belief, and that she cited that. You know, her citation was, I cannot, in good faith as a Christian, sign a document where 2 people of the same gender are getting married. It's an abomination.
Yeah, Kim Davis was, she was presented with a quandary once the 5 justices handed down their ruling. Under Kentucky law, which she had taken an oath to uphold, and so help her God, marriage was between a man and a woman. Under now the law of Kentucky, as the Supreme Court said it had to be redefined, marriage is between any 2 people. And so she said, wait a minute now, who's defining what here? I've taken my oath of office to uphold the law of Kentucky. They're saying that I have to regard now a different law of Kentucky, which isn't on the books. I can't find a statute that says what they say it is anywhere. It's not written down anywhere. It's just their pronouncement from the bench. So she said, I'm not going to do any marriages until this gets straightened out. And that was the proper response, to say, look, government, get your act together here. One of you is saying it has to be this way. Another one is saying it has to be this way. Which one do I follow? And so she was following her oath of office as best she could at that time by saying, you know, until this gets straightened out, I'm not signing my name to any marriage certificate. If you want to get somebody else to sign it, she never said, you know, nobody could get married. She said, just, it's under the law. I have to put my name on it, and I can't do that.
Right. Now, this whole thing with the Supreme Court is starting to bite them in the butt little by little. I noticed a judge would not divorce a same-sex couple, citing the Supreme Court.
Yes, in Tennessee. In other words, now we've got the problem of, okay, the Supreme Court has said when people have to be considered married, and this judge said, well, then maybe the Supreme Court should tell us when they're to be considered divorced. And that's the logical next step, because, as I said, if they, you know, following Justice Kennedy and his majority reasoning, if they can use that reasoning to impose same-sex marriage on everyone, they can also require every state to grant no-fault divorce, which is anathema. I mean, for a Supreme Court to talk about divorce law is the opposite of what federal law versus state law is. Divorce law is the essence of state law. But now they can go in there and make that same decree there. So this Tennessee judge just threw it back at them, said, okay, you're starting to go into this area. You can jolly well define divorce for me as well.
Now, we probably should do some history lesson here. July 4th, 1776 was the greatest treasonary moment in this country's history, where we said to a system that was legal, a system that was just in their eyes, a system run by a king, no more. That
Correct.
We the people have decided we're going to break ties and we're going to go about this ourselves. And then from that moment on, our history is filled with times when men and women have stood up and said no more. I can think of Martin Luther King would be a great example. In fact, on my other page here, I have a quote from him. Let's see if I can pull it up quickly. Or did I move? Here we go. Martin Luther King said, "I submit that an individual who breaks a law that his conscience tells him is unjust, and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the consciousness of the community over its injustice, is in reality expressing a higher respect for that law." That's pretty interesting.
Yes, exactly. And that's in the great tradition, as I say, of Thomas Jefferson, and our Declaration of Independence, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary, etc., etc. And in this case, when the government doesn't respect the law, then according to Jefferson, then the citizen doesn't have to respect the government. And that's what we're leading to here, because the government is not respecting the law. As I say, the justices, the Congress, the president, they're all just stepping on the law without regard to the consequences of this for our national polity. And it's going to get much worse, I think, before it gets better. The problem is, what do Christians do in this? Because the federal judges are bound by what the U.S. Supreme Court tells them, so they're not going to go against the Supreme Court. But the rest of us, the citizens and all that, we don't have to necessarily kowtow to this any more than people kowtowed to the Dred Scott decision, or the Plessy v. Ferguson decision back in 1896.
Or Roe v. Wade. Yeah, I mean,
Roe v. Wade, exactly.
Yeah, the examples are numerous, because, and I think it was James Madison who said this, we're not a nation of angels. If all men were angels, we would not need law.
We would need no government, correct.
Right. And so we do need a government, we do need rule of law. But let's talk about, since the Magna Carta on, what is the nature of the rule of law? And that is to provide over time justice.
Well, and Christians have always taken the position that God is the ultimate source of law. So given a choice between God's law and a law passed by your government cannot tell you to violate God's law as a Christian. And so that's when your Christian duty is clear, to stand up and resist an ungodly command. And there's fortunately not too many of those that it could give, but there have been a few. And one of them, they're starting to say, "Thou shalt bake a cake for this person's wedding." If God's law speaks to you and says you're not supposed to support such unions in any Christian way at all, including making a cake for them or something like that, even though they pay you, then that's your conscience, and you have to follow and obey that. And we have statutes in place, the Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, both states and at the federal level, that are supposed to give you an out to exercise your religion in that way. And they say, in essence, if the state can come up with a less coercive way to resolve this problem, so that they don't have to send you to jail if you don't bake a cake, then the state's required to find that less coercive way and use it, such as, for example, how about going down to this other bakery down the street that will happily bake a cake?
The Muslim one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sure. Or the Jewish one. I mean, and here's, where the rule of law, one of the essences, it has to be applied fairly to everyone. And when we find out that the Muslim baker doesn't have to abide by this law or ruling, only the secular and the Christian, then the law is not being applied to everyone.
No, and I've privately, it's been clear to me for some time that if the Bible is correct, particularly the New Testament and the warnings in the New Testament, the persecution of Christians has to increase and go up exponentially as we approach end times. I'm not saying we're there yet or anything like that, but as you watch the persecution of Christians increase, don't be surprised, because the New Testament tells us it has to happen.
Well, this is pre-post trib altogether in one, and there is no way out of it. And you're right. Jesus warned us several times. Paul warned us. Peter warned us.
Right.
The end is near, and it's not going to be pretty right before the end. It's not supposed to be. But in my understanding of Christian history, every time Christians are persecuted, they grow stronger.
Yes.
And sometimes the nation itself changes.
The church built on the blood of martyrs. Yeah. Well, hopefully we aren't getting to that kind of blood martyrdom yet. It's enough to be incarcerated, but that's the picture that is going to be increasingly the case as the minority justices warned us, right, in Obergefell, saying, they're giving only lip service to religious freedom here. Watch out, watch your back, you're not protected at all. And if the federal government can't protect religious rights, which is where it's enshrined in the First Amendment, and why this comes.
I lost you for 1 second there. What'd you say?
I say if the federal government is not going to protect the freedom of religion, which it was founded to do, and it's enshrined in the First Amendment, then the federal government is not doing its primary job.
Yeah, it's amazing how the Bill of Rights only applies to freedom of speech to those who are worthy to speak, freedom of religion to the religion that doesn't bother anybody else, freedom to bear arms as long as those arms are kept in a closet locked away with no bullets. Yeah, it's amazing what the Bill of Rights has done for us.
Right. Yes, exactly. And how it's become over time not a Bill of Rights, but a bill of, shall we say, particulars.
Yes.
With which to indict Christians and to hold them up. I want to respond to one other argument, which is that Kim Davis was trying to impose her religion on everyone. That is the exact opposite of what she was doing. She was saying not opposing anybody getting a marriage certificate, just having one with her name on it. So they were perfectly free to go get a marriage certificate, and the governor of Kentucky could have assigned someone else to that function. So it wasn't a case of her imposing her religion. She was saying, don't you impose your religion on my conscience and make me go against my own religion. That's all she was saying.
Yeah. Now, this is a great chance that we can finish up now. We got 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 55 seconds. It's going down. How can we reapply to have states have their rights back? States have been losing rights since day one.
Well, the first thing that everybody should be concerned with is the next election and who gets elected president, because if we have another one like the current president, we will continue to have a Supreme Court like the current Supreme Court, and we'll get even worse. So, I mean, this is as I say, the folly of the Supreme Court deciding things on a 5-4 vote, but the truth is, that's what politicizes the court. That's what makes the appointment so political, because if they appoint another justice, if a new president appoints a conservative justice who then says, I think Obergefell's wrong, then there goes Obergefell and there goes same-sex marriage. And look what a mess that will create with the couples that were already married are no longer now recognized, or what are they going to do about that? So this is what happens once you start doing things that the court's not supposed to do. You create such an unholy mess that people can't make hide their tail of it. It's just a...
Alan, I want to thank you for your time. You can bill my old address, and I shall talk to you next week.
I want to wish you Godspeed, Kevin, and getting it into a new home as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that very much. God bless, my friend.